Hey everybody, I want to talk to everyone today about knee pain from squatting. This is something that Glenn is actually having some problems with right now. So I did what any good training partner would do and started looking up what does science have to say. So this is not going to cover squat form or technique because I am by no means an expert. Instead, I just went through a bunch of scientific studies, different things, looking at what would be causing knee pain in the squats, what you have to look out for, what the issues are. So I'm hoping that this can help you out. The very first thing that I want to say is the myth that squats are bad for your knees. That is 100% a myth. In fact, going through these studies, I have seen numerous occasions where squats were used and recommended in rehab programs. So it is a very good rehabilitation tool for knee injuries, in particular ACL tears. The fact that most people that go into a doctor's office for knee pain because of squats have done something wrong. However, when the doctors start recording the injuries, they see, hey, all these people coming in with knee problems, that's because they're squatting. So squats are bad for your knees. That's kind of where that came from, because you don't go to the doctor if your knees are feeling awesome. You don't go up and say, hey doc, guess what, I'm squatting, my knees feel awesome. Okay, so that is a myth that squats are bad for your knees. But one thing for me, I had to go to rehab for my knee. I spent 3 months in rehab for my knee when I just started lifting. Why? I was squatting wrong. I had no idea what I was doing. I had high bar, knees traveling forward. I broke at the knees first. I did not break at the hips and messed up my knee. 3 months in rehab. So I've been there. I had to learn how to do it. And again, not an expert, but having to learn that. All right, second thing that I wanted to mention is that although squats are perfectly safe for your knees if performed correctly, not everyone has the same knee. Not everyone is built the same. Everyone has different leverages. Everyone has different bone structures. And of course, everyone has different injuries. If you have certain injuries, that does not mean that you can squat the same as everyone else. So it's going to have to be tailored very much to you as an individual in what you can and cannot handle. So let's go over a couple different squats here.
This is an illustration showing the 3 different types of squat bar position. You have from left to right the front squat, the high bar squat, and the low bar squat. Now what I want you to pay attention to is not the center of gravity, but how much forward knee travel you have in these different situations. You can see that as the higher the bar, the further your knees are going to travel forward. Here's another illustration. You can see that low bar position on the right. The hips are much further back, the shins are more vertical, and the knees are closer to the toes. And what I mean by all knees not being equal, look at this Olympic lifter here. Look at how deep he is and how much strain there is on the knee. You need healthy knees to do that.
There are hybridizations of every one of those. It's all about where you put the bar. That's the only difference. Where are you putting the bar on this? So I want you to look at these pictures and notice the different knee positions and the back angles, where the center of gravity is over your foot.
So again, you can see the bar position is going to affect your back angle, your knee travel, and your hips. These are all things to consider.
Most studies found that the pressure increased the further down you went. The deeper your squat, the higher the shearing forces and the higher the compressive forces. Now, for those of you who don't know, shearing force is what we really need to be worried about. That is when your bones are going to move in opposed directions. So, for example, if this is your tibia, so the bottom part of your leg, and this is your femur, you have one bone going in this direction and another bone going in this direction. Okay, this is what you do not want. This is going to cause tears. This is going to have all sorts of negative impact. And of course, if you do somehow manage to twist your knee joint, you could quite possibly injure the ACL. So it's very important to make sure that you are not allowing your knees to twist at any point in the squat. However, all these studies did use people that were experienced somewhat in the squat. Most of these had at least some sort of gym experience, and in a couple of studies, the people that they studied could squat at least 1.5 times their body weight. Some of them were not that high, and the study uses different weights. Some of them were pretty light, and some of them were pretty heavy. But they all determine the same thing. The deeper you go, the more force you're going to have. Now, a compressive force is something that your body is actually equipped to handle, although if you do have cartilage issues, it can become a problem. And that is compressive. They're going to be aligned, so you're going to be smashing down. So your femur is going to be smashing straight down into your tibia, and that could damage your cartilage or damage the joint. But that is what your knees are made to do. As you know, we stand straight up. So your body is well equipped to deal with compressive forces. It's the same thing with your back when you are deadlifting. As long as you're sticking to compressive forces, it's not a big deal. However, as soon as you get shearing forces, it's really bad. Now, what I want to point out is even in a deep squat, the shearing forces, which were predominantly in the posterior, were well within the tolerance of what the joint and the tendons could handle for a healthy knee. That's key, a healthy knee. So what they found is the further your knees went past your feet, the further your forward knee travel was, the more the pressure and force increased. And there was an interesting study where they actually stopped someone from being able to have their knees travel forward, and they discovered that eliminated most of the force in the knee and instead transferred it to the hips and lower back. So that's a whole different issue and a problem there. But if you're having knee pain, there's two things right there. You're going too deep. Your knees are traveling too far forward past your toes. Okay. Now, another one is bouncing at the bottom of the squat. And right here, let me just refer to my notes here because I want to give you the exact number. So, referring to notes. Bouncing at the bottom of the squat increased shear force by approximately 33%. Okay? So now, if you had a healthy knee, you weren't worried about any of this anyways because you're well within your allowable tolerance. But now you're starting to get knee pain and you're bouncing at the bottom. Well, it's probably because of that. And one of the things that they did identify in a couple of different studies is when you go too low, a lot of the shear force is now going to increase because your hamstrings are actually making contact with your calf.
Like in this situation.
And now it is actually forcing your knee joint apart. So again, illustrate with my awesome hands. You're coming down. All of a sudden, this touches here. Well, what's going to happen? It can't keep going, so this has to pull apart. So you start getting, again, the shearing forces where they're going in opposing directions. And that's going to snap your knee. It's not going to feel good. So if you're getting pain in the squat, those are three things right there that you need to look at. Okay, so if you're squatting too deep, solution that they found, switch to a low bar stance. You will not squat as deep with a low bar stance as long as you do it with proper form. You can also stop using Olympic lifting shoes if you are. Anything with a raised heel is going to allow you to not have your ankle flexibility limit your depth, your forward knee travel. So the more your ankles can bend, the further your knees can go forward and the deeper you can go. So if you're having way too much trouble with going too deep, too much knee pain, you can get rid of the heels, go to flat shoes if you have the ankle flexibility. One of the studies found that a shank, which I'm thinking, shank, no, apparently shank means your shins, from your knee to your ankle, which I did not know. That was news to me. You want it as vertical as possible to eliminate any sort of shearing or high force on your knee. And that's actually recommended. Again, let me refer to my notes. The barbell squat exercise guidelines as published by the National Strength and Conditioning Association, so the bigwigs, cite the need to keep the knees from moving forward past the toes or to keep the shank as vertical as possible when performing the exercise. Okay? But what they found, and this is interesting, that they recommend, in order to optimize the forces at all involved joints, meaning your back, your hips, your knees, it may be advantageous to permit the knees to move slightly past the toes when in a parallel squat position. Now, this study found that the person who could squat the most weight in their study had the least shearing amount of force in the knee. The person who had the highest in the study was not a good squatter and had the most forward knee travel. Okay? So, those of you who are concerned about your knees, those are a couple of things that you can look at. Now, another thing that I'm going to mention, as I said, the deeper you go, the more likely you are to increase the shear force and have problems with your knee. Because if you are not able to push your hips far enough back to hit depth, and you attempt to force depth, you are going to have your knees go forward. And I see it in videos all the time. Now again, by no means am I saying I am an expert squatter. I can watch my squat form and tear it apart myself. And I'm working on it, and that's always a work in progress. Knees don't travel too far past the toes. You're going to minimize it. So, we're talking about if this is your toes, your knees are going to be around right here. Not way out here. And, identical, or theoretically perfect. Your knee would be directly over your ankle. Okay? So, a vertical shank. But they found if you go just a little bit forward, that you're going to share the load between the knee and the hip. First study, effective knee position on hip and knee torques during the barbell squat. The next one, a biomechanical comparison of back and front squats in healthy trained individuals. The present study represents an effort to differentiate between the potential advantages and disadvantages of the two most commonly used forms of the squat exercise. Although bar position did not influence muscle activity, muscle activity was significantly different between the ascending and descending phases, which leave it to scientists to be all psyched out that, dude, it's harder when you're actually having to push up the weight than it is going down. You could have talked to anybody that squatted, ever. Which is harder, going down or coming back up? The coming back up is the hard part, right? But they were all geeked out. Like, they mentioned it 5 or 6 times in the study. Like, oh man, it's harder to ascend. It's harder to do the concentric phase of the lift. Yeah, I know. Whatever. Over the effects of technique variations on knee biomechanics during the squat and leg press. A biomechanical analysis of the knee joint during deep knee bends with heavy loads. Knee shear forces during a squat exercise using a barbell and a weight machine. Now, what I will say about that is they did find that a weight machine was increasing the shearing forces by 30 to 40%. So, train with a barbell. I wouldn't use a Smith machine, and I would not use a weight machine if you're having any issues with your knees at all. Knee biomechanics of the dynamic squat exercise. A 3-dimensional biomechanical analysis of the squat during varying stance width and bar load effects on leg muscle activity during the parallel squat. So those are all the different studies that I looked at and went through to go and find out why are the knees hurting. So my conclusion, something's damaged in the knee, or you're doing bad form. In either cases, you should immediately stop squatting and start looking at your form. Get a camera out. Don't even use a barbell. See what you're doing. Are you going way too deep? Are your hamstrings hitting your calves? Are you bouncing in the hole? Are your knees traveling ridiculously far forward? Stop having the ego. Just stop. Deload. Go back. You need to train with the bar. You need to train with 135. You need to relearn how to squat. Don't just keep doing it. Don't make excuses that my knee hurt. Fix it. Figure out why you're having the problem. Are you the one whose knees are too forward? Start doing wall squats. Start doing box squats. Get your hips to come back. Are you the one that's bouncing in the hole? Slow it down. Do pause squats. Do breathing squats, which are neat. And in both of those situations, you are going to take the weight down. You can even do pin squats. So you go down and you set the pins so you hit depth and it actually takes the bar off. So you got to stay there. Hold, breathe, come back up. Train yourself to do the descent slowly and you can power through the ascending portion of the lift. If you're the person that is just going way too deep, box squats, pin squats, again, just get it to stop you from going too deep. One of the things that I did when we were having this problem is I actually had a lifting partner, Glenn, would put his hand like this where I was hitting depth. So I would just feel it and I'd come back up. You may not want to touch your partner's butt. If you don't want to touch your lifting partner's butt, then I don't know why you're powerlifting or doing strongman in the first place, because you should totally be comfortable with that. I mean, I learned that from Mark Bell. You should be okay with touching your lifting partner's butt. It shouldn't make you uncomfortable. We're trying to prevent knee pain here, guys. So that's it. If you have any questions, you want me to go over anything else, you want me to go further in depth into these studies, please let me know. Take it easy, guys. Squat to depth, but do it without pain. Do not hurt your knees. You need these to walk around. You need these to have fun. And you do not want to be the person sitting there in your cast getting reconstructive surgery, or even worse, being the person that refuses to squat because your knees hurt. But the descent, the concentric portion, in fact, the EMG level for the